Hey, welcome back to True-Moto-Resto. And before I tear down the CB900F, I got a couple more tests I got to do. I suspect the charging system may not be doing its thing, so I'm going to check that this morning. I'm going to fire the bike up again, and I've got a voltage regulator on, a voltmeter on there. So we'll see what I get when the bike's running and when it revs up to 3,000 to 5,000. See if I get sufficient voltage. Okay, so the battery is probably at 80% charge. I had it on the charger a little bit yesterday. So that's what I'm reading with the bike turned off, is 13 volts. So I'm going to turn the ignition on. And we get 12.7-ish, 12.6, somewhere in there. So I'm going to fire the bike up, see what happens here. My voltage regulator is bad, or the rotor likely is bad. The bike's idling a lot better than it was, generally running. It's still snapping and popping a little bit on the throttle, but we're getting there a little bit at a time. So yeah, definitely need to order some parts for the charging system. I'll do a bit more testing and see what it is. Apparently the rotors for these pretty commonly go bad, so there's another thing that wasn't in the budget, but what do? You got to deal with it. Alright, so I've taken the generator cover off, the alternator cover, and my suspicion is it's going to be this guy, but I mean, it could be anything. It could be the rotor, it could be the stator, though from what I've heard, the stators usually do last quite well. These are typically a problem. And then if these go, apparently also you can have issues with the voltage regulator as well. So I'm going to test this guy first, and it's supposed to be, I think, somewhere between 3.6 and 4.4 ohms across the these copper rings here. So let's see what I get here. So I got 2.6. That definitely seems to be out of spec. Yep. So that could be a problem. Okay, so I'm going to use my other multimeter now because it's got thinner prongs on it, just to test the resistance, the continuity between on the stator side. So between all the yellow, yeah, there's the first pair of wires on the stator. There's a second pair of wires on the stator. These are the yellow wires now. 0.6. So they're all about 0.6, 0.7. That's on the. Then we'll do the black and white on the stator. .4, which is supposed to be. Let's see, 10 to 12 ohms. This is supposed to be 10 to 12, and I've got 4.42. So far, I'm not doing well at all. This is back to the rotor. Trying to get a consistent reading of these things is not easy. Maybe that has something to do with this shitty multimeter that I have. So 3 ohms, 2.8 ohms, 2.9 ohms, 2.8, I'll call it 2.9. All right, so I also tested the regulator rectifier, and the measurements I'm getting there seem to be okay. There's a whole pile of different tests for the Reg Rec. I just kind of jotted my notes down here. So whether you're testing the positive or negative to the green and then touching the yellows, whether it's going to infinity or whether you get a reading. I mean, it's supposed to be identical. They're not identical. They're close, but they're not identical. Same when you do the next test with the red and white to the yellow. They're close, but they're not identical. Everything is within range with the testing of the white to black, white to green, or green to black and green to white. Okay, so according to my readings on the ohm meter for the charging system, the rotor out of range, it measures 2.9 ohms when you measure those rings, and the book says 3.6 to 4.4. The stator is out of range. The pairs of yellows when you test across pairs, first pair 0.7, second pair 0.6, third pair 0.6, and they're supposed to be between 0.41 and 0.51, so they're a little bit out. And the resistance between the black and the white wire was 4.4 ohms, and it should be 10 to 12. All the Reg Rec all checks out okay. Now, what seems unusual to me is that it seems highly unlikely that the rotor and the stator have both failed. So I'm not sure if I'm not sure what I'm looking at, to be honest. Are they out of spec? Yes, they are. I don't know enough to say, hey, well, you know, if you're getting a 2.9 ohms, you know, it's not so bad because, you know, the resistance goes up a little bit once everything gets hot. Because this was all done with the bike had only been run for 5 minutes, so your rotor's probably fine, blah blah blah. I don't know, but I'd rather not just be chucking money and parts at it. I'd rather replace something with an educated decision based on the numbers that I have. But unfortunately, like, it seems to me the stator is further out than the rotor, although, you know, I have heard that the rotors are the more problematic portion of it. Typically stators don't fail in these things, so I don't know. Tell me what you think, and in the meantime I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research and see which way I go on this, because these things are not cheap, right? $250 Canadian, 260 Canadian for a rotor, 200 Canadian for a stator, and if I buy a Reg Rec, it's about 100 Canadian. So that's all for Ric's rotors, Ric's stators, Ric's regulator. They're all available here in Canada from Fortnite. So let's see where we end up